But where was the heat? It was way up on the upper floors. The lower floors remained stone cold and very strong as the people evacuated. And how did the towers fall? The upper floors accelerated down into the larger, cold, and stronger structure below. And the only force, we are told, that caused this remarkable motion was downward from gravity alone. But what happened when the blacksmith applied a downward force?
It's very hot, but not melted. Obviously, it is not melted.
The steel rod didn't accelerate down like the top of the towers. And he's right. Obviously, it's not melted. But that's what the saying, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, is all about.
The starting point in science is observation. What you are seeing here is what happened to the North Tower of the World Trade Center, the second of 3 buildings to collapse on 9/11/2001. I use the word collapse, but words can be deceptive. What do you really see happening here? There's a tremendous amount of falling debris, but under the canopy of debris, do you see the rapid sequence of explosive ejections of material? Some of the jets have been clocked at over 100 miles per hour. I will call them explosions because it's hard to find other words that describe what we are seeing here. The explosions are not isolated and few. They are continuous and widespread. They move progressively down the faces of the building, keeping pace with the falling debris. Perhaps you can imagine a natural cause, but I can't. Notice that the explosions are occurring on multiple floors at once, over a wide zone, not in a floor-by-floor sequence that might be explained by pancaking collapse. Notice there are explosions far below the point of collapse. Some are isolated and focused. These are often referred to as squibs and are commonly seen in controlled demolitions. However, this is not a standard controlled demolition. The building is being progressively destroyed from the top down by waves of explosions, creating a huge debris field. The destruction is in waves, not just in one wave. Most obvious is a rapid sequence of explosions near the visible corner of the building. But simultaneously we can see another wave of explosions much further down the face of the building under the canopy of falling debris. Notice that both waves of explosions progress down the face of the building, nearly keeping pace with the falling debris just a few feet away. Slabs of concrete did not fall to the ground and smash to dust. There is almost no concrete in the rubble pile. Notice that the concrete is being forcefully ejected outward from the sides of the building, already pulverized to dust. Notice that embedded in the dust clouds are huge girders and entire sections of steel framing that are being hurled out of the building. The horizontal speed of some of the girders has been clocked at over 70 miles per hour. Some of these girders impale themselves in the sides of neighboring buildings. Some landed as much as 2 football fields away from the base of the tower. What could hurl heavy girders with such force and give them such speed? Some people have suggested that the weight of the tower crushing down on the girders caused them to flex, and they sprung sideways by a spring action. But we are not seeing isolated jumping girders. We are seeing a major fraction of the mass of the building, steel, concrete, office furniture, and the remains of human beings, reduced to small pieces of rubble and fine dust, and being explosively ejected in all directions. Bone fragments are found on the roofs of adjacent buildings. The bones were not crushed in the falling mass, or they would have been trapped in the debris pile. They were pulverized along with everything else and blown out in all directions. The NIST investigators have claimed that the top section of the building above the plane impact point came down like a pile driver, crushing the undamaged lower section of the building all the way to the ground. The top section of the building is, however, noticeably absent. There is nothing above the ring of explosions except for a fountain of debris. Can you see a pile driver? It does not appear that the building is being crushed by anything. The waves of destruction and explosive ejections of material are occurring over a wide zone that continues all the way to the top of what remains of the building. The scientists at NIST did not model the collapse of the towers. Their analysis was gravely flawed in many ways, but the biggest flaw was that the scope of their investigation was artificially limited. They took their analysis only to the point of initiation of collapse, as though all that followed was inevitable and needed no explanation. The scope of their investigation was artificially limited to what might have happened or could have happened to begin the collapse. What they explicitly did not take into account is what actually happened. By limiting their investigation to the natural precursors of collapse, plane damage and the fire, they ruled out from the start any possibility of discovering evidence of planned demolition. In other words, anything that occurred during the collapse itself, such as the evidence you're seeing here, was explicitly scripted out of the investigation. Any analytical model of the collapse, no matter how simple or how sophisticated, is a bad model and bad science if it does not come back full circle to explain the actual observations. What do you see? This DVD has focused very much on the physics of 9/11, and basically it's a personal statement on my part. This is the angle I come at it because this is who I am and this is what I know. And one of the things that amazes me is how I, as simply a high school teacher, have enough, if I actually apply what I know, there's so many things that are so clear about what's happening. There's so many people out there I've talked to that are much more knowledgeable about science even than I am. And the typical result is they've never even heard that Building 7 came down. They've never bothered to look at the evidence. And it's like there's a very strong stigma that has officially been placed on this to call it conspiracy theory and to try to stigmatize any interest in these events. 9/11 really is an event that changed the world, and it's changed everything since then. It hasn't changed our fundamental values, but it's changed the way our government interacts with the people. We have the ongoing wars of 9/11, as some people have put it. And as long as those wars are continuing to be fought, we can't just let 9/11 get swept under the rug, because this is where these things come from. We've killed over 1 million people in Iraq. That's a statistic that the papers don't tell you, but it's been researched multiple times by reliable institutions. We have killed over 1 million people in Iraq. It's not just that they have killed each other. This is an atrocity on a huge scale, and this is something that we cannot just let go. There's so many angles to this. I've come at it from the point of view of science. There's the political science, there's the sociology, there's the question of how come official science, like the people involved with NIST, have been manipulated the way they have to take good scientists with integrity and be able to use their talents and stamp it with a political agenda. And how people can allow this to happen with their life's work. Who am I speaking to? I'm speaking to the general public, whoever has enough interest in these events to have watched this video through. But I'm also speaking to people that have backgrounds in science, that if you actually look and ask the questions, the kinds of things I've done, or if you have expertise in other areas, look into this from your own particular perspective. I specifically am encouraging people who are involved in official authoritative science, such as NIST, to evaluate your life's work. Daniel Ellsberg is an example of someone who found it necessary to step outside the norms of what was expected of him in order to have a life that he could live with himself. And I really am hoping that some of you who are perhaps watching this video, if you have knowledge of what really happened, that you will make yourselves known and share this with the world. This is something that has not been resolved. Yes, it's a few years ago, but the wars of 9/11 are continuing. And it can't just be swept under the rug. It's too important for that. We need 9/11 truth.
You're watching the Earth News Channel. You can change your world.